it's already built. My first stop is to make sure that other individuals at my company, so roles, the folks that have access to this particular template are admins and payroll clerks. I can move right into the recipient. Matt Marshall is my intended recipient. His checking account information is already there. The checkbox for notification is already checked, meaning when I execute this transfer, he will receive a notification that says that he has an incoming wire from us. It won't convey, because it's email, anything that's sensitive, but he will know that there's a heads up that that's coming. You could also deselect that if you didn't wish to notify him. And then you could key in your dollar amount, any messages that you might have to that particular recipient. At this point, I could add a recipient. If the recipient list, I only see one recipient here as an option, and earlier we saw 6, and that's because we only have one that is a recipient of wire transfers. The others were ACH. Normally, one would administer the recipients in advance of trying to send the wire, but the system is flexible enough to know that, hey, business process changes sometimes. I may be executing a particular transaction. This isn't the recipient I wanted. I can simply go in and create a new recipient as simply as selecting new recipient. That would take us right back to the screen that we previously saw, where we would key in that information, add that account, and then that would place it back out in the list of available recipients, and we could continue our work. In this case, we'll resume where we were. And there are 2 ways to navigate this payment workflow. If you were working, for instance, an ACH or something that had a lot of content, you can work across the top. These are all links. Or if for some reason the view takes you down below where these are no longer seen, you can simply hit next. In this case, you can make this payment through a subsidiary. If you have no subsidiaries, you won't need to worry about that. In this case, we do. So we're gonna select sub company A, and we'll move on. And we're gonna make this payment from our checking account that is available to us. And now we will select a processing date. As it's a wire transfer, many times that'll be the same day. In this case, we're after cutoff time, so tomorrow is the earliest available date. The description, we can leave that as is. And we can set that. In this case, we could save this if this were just going to be a template. I can draft it, or I can approve it. And that's because this particular individual has both draft and approve rights. Let's go ahead and draft it. In this case, it'll take our content that we have, and it'll give us that yellow overview that we talked about a few moments ago. Notice it says, hey, your domestic wire is drafted. However, it still needs approval. We don't want you to think that it's all done and it's gonna go. That's why you get the yellow wire notification. And then we give you some basic details about this particular transaction. We can close the transaction. We can go to the online activity area to look at this transaction, or we could notify approvers. If I'm just a draft rights individual and I need to notify somebody who can approve it, I can select that notify approvers, and it would give me a list of who the approvers are and the desired way to notify them via text or telephone, and I can send that on its way. I'm gonna go ahead and close this. We'll now return where we were. So you can see, as it relates to wire transfers, very simple. This workflow is the same on a telephone as it is a desktop. We can just work our way right through the workflow. And then over here, we would see a listing, just a micro listing of all of our wire transfer activity, be that pending or processed. It's a quick snapshot. I can also search those without having to go elsewhere in the software to see those. So very basic and quick to use payments workflow that works on all channels. And that kind of rounds out the transaction activity in terms of executing something that relates to a funds transfer or moving money through wire transfer. That leaves us just one more option here, which is called online activity. And as we go through the system today, I like to think of 3 basic pillars in the system. The first pillar is, because it's very easy to get down tangential paths and be very, very, buried very, very deep and kind of lose sight of where we are relative to the 3 basic paths. So the first path is, here's a listing of all of our accounts. This is our landing page. The second of those paths was the one that we were just on, where we were transferring funds or wire transfers. We're executing some sort of a transaction against those accounts. And the third pillar, the third area, is online activity. This is where we get to go and see everything that we've originated inside the system, and we can take action on it. We can cancel it, or at least go and look at every transaction that's ever been generated inside of online banking. This is important. This is not constrained to 2 years of view. This will contain every activity of every kind that originates in online banking for the length of time that you enjoy the system. So we can search those transactions just like we saw earlier. If for some reason I wanted to go look at payroll activity, this would go and it would pull me back any of the payrolls that are out there. We have one that's drafted. If that's the one I was after, as the action taker, I can come over here to action and I can approve this transaction. I can cancel the transaction. I can inquire upon it to the credit union. If I wanted to duplicate this, if I didn't want to go through the process of creating another, in this case, payroll, I could copy it, edit those details, and away we go, or I could print out the details. Another interesting piece to this is if I were to select that payroll, now I can come down and I can see all of the details that are specific to this payroll or wire or funds transfer, whatever it is. So at a very granular level, there's everything about this transaction, who originated it, what the ID was assigned to it by the system, the from and to accounts, the description of the accounts, the individual transaction. But just as importantly, if I continue to move down, we have a sense of, relayed through this pictograph, of exactly where in the process it is. This was drafted by the role of company administrator on 523/121. On our side of the fence, which is our company, it's awaiting an approval. And if that is granted, it'll hop over to the credit union side and we'll see when it's authorized and when it's processed. So we really don't need to pick up the phone as much in terms of trying to figure out what kinds of transactions are in one state. All one needs to do is run to the online activity area, select the transaction, and we can instantly see whether it's on us or whether it's on the credit union in terms of where it's been processed. And once it's been processed, all of these boxes will be complete. So kind of a handy feature there. We'll get back to our single transactions at the top of the online activity bar. Pardon me. A little hitch in the get along there for a moment. But anyway, back to the online activity. Again, I can go search those. I can use a filter search. So we have a few more things to choose from here. We can actually go look by transaction type. If I'm looking for a batch or a funds transfer, I can further constrain those by their current status of authorized or canceled or pending, whatever they might be. And then I can add in the accounts created by the start dates. All of those items that I might consider standard for a filter search are in there. And then again, I can download a listing of this. I can export that if I want to. I can retrieve those. And those are then available for me offline. So there's a number of things that we can do in activity, including take action upon transactions that need it. I can cancel those transactions. In fact, this one, I'll cancel this transaction. And I will cancel this transaction. And upon doing so, we should see that as soon as it's done, that action has been completed. Sorry, that backed up a little bit. So now we can no longer approve that because it's been canceled. And if I were to open that, I would come down and I would see that the company administrator drafted it and then the company administrator canceled it, thus removing the ability for it to go over to the credit union for any kind of service. So a handy part of the software to be able to go and manage transactions as they've occurred or take action on ones that are waiting. You may have employees who can draft. If you're an approver, this is where you would come and take care of those transactions. So kind of rounding out the standard functionality that we might see in executable transactions off of our accounts. Let's go ahead and skip a bit here to some of our services. I won't go through each of these because it's really about telling you where they are. The check reorder cycle is very similar to what you know today. It'll open up an interface where you can reorder your checks. This is an interesting one where I may want to go and update my profile. So this is your online banking profile. Perhaps for the regular savings share, I need to change one of my addresses, telephone numbers, or email addresses. That is the area in which I would do that. Online documents is going to be a repository for documents that are custom built by the credit union, need to be just conveyed out to the membership. This is where I can go and pick those up. Of course, I can issue a stop payment as well. That might be Again, a single stop payment, in this case, a single check. I might go and select the account for which that is relevant, enter the check number, then proceed right on down to whoever the payee was, the amount. We've all seen stop payments, but there is a flexibility of doing single or multiple check and then submitting those out to the credit union as well. And then secure forms. Secure forms are another repository for documentation the credit union will administer. Usually these are interactive forms. If I had to submit an application of some sort, it would be placed in the secure forms folder with instruction to go and pick it up there, fill it out and submit it, and it would be submitted securely. So some services that are outside of the traditional executing a funds transfer or bill payment would be located in the services directory. Let's go ahead and we'll skip just a little bit. We saw earlier the messages. This is the general message repository. In this case, we see that we have a new message that is in, and it's in bold, just like it would be in an email, so that we can go and see those. It looks like we submitted one earlier today, and the reply has already come back to have a great day in this case, and I can reply to those messages. The interesting thing about these messages, when I send one, in this new system, I have the ability to actually send that to exactly where it needs to go here at the credit union. So if that's a wire transfer inquiry, I can send it to the wire group. If it needs to be a Visa dispute, it can go to the Visa group. So I can route my messaging as appropriate to the groups here. And then, of course, I'll get responses and I can manage those messages in the general message area. I'll skip just a little bit here to some settings. Account preferences are just that. It allows us to modify how our accounts look and feel. We saw in the very first stage of this that I can modify their sort order, but here I can go and I can turn them on or off if I don't wish to visit. If I don't wish to see these with each visit to online banking, I can certainly do that. I can also edit the name of each of the primary groups. And in this case, it was primary accounts. If I had 2 or 3 of those, I can go and modify those. Security preferences. This is an important area. I would advise everyone upon your first login to go pay a visit to the security preferences area. The first thing that one can do here is change your password. Very straightforward process. You'll key in your old one, select your new one, and away you go. I don't think there's anything. You just follow the instructions down below that we're compliant with this security policy. The change login ID, if you're tired of your current one, you can go in and change one. The area that I really wanted to focus in was secure access code delivery. You'll recall from our first login experience about whatever that's been several minutes ago, that we were able to select from a list of those temporary access code targets. And this is a listing of those where I can edit them. I can edit a target if I change an email address or a text. I can delete them, or I can add new temporary access code targets. Side note of importance, we will allow email addresses as a target for your first login. However, transactionally based, if I'm actually executing a wire, I've drafted the wire and I'm now approving the wire, you'll be prompted to receive another out-of-band temporary access code potentially. And those will only come via phone number or text because they're more secure than email. So emails are listed here as a result of being able to first time log into the system. And then thereafter, if I'm executing transactions, I'll be focused on phone numbers and text. But this is where you'll manage your list. We are migrating the list as we see it in the old system. You may have a Yahoo mail address out there that's very old. That would be the time to go and remove those and add your temporary access code targets that are current and useful. The alerts area in this little box, a variety of things that we can do here. You can go and set a variety of alerts, including date-based alerts, account-based alerts, history alerts, or online transactions alerts. And then the listing of all of those, let's get back to those quick. If I have them, they'll be listed in this main field here. So of all of the alert types that are possible, we only have one that's an online transaction alert. And this is telling us that when an ACH payment is drafted against this account, send a secure message to me so that I know that that's being addressed or that that's happening. There are some security alerts that are not yet visible in the system that the credit union, we're still configuring some of the final touches on those. Some of those you will not be able to address. For instance, if your password changes, we're going to send you an alert.